Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing of a review copy of Point Blank V is for Victory from Lock and Load Games. Now this is a card-based game, and as we'll see, card-based is the units, the terrain, the actions are all driven by cards, and if you like cards, this is a treasure trove of cards inside, as we shall see. Contextually, World War II, 1944, a variety of Allied forces versus German forces in a wide range of scenarios. Let's jump in and get started. So before we open up the box, just a couple of general points to other similar games in this subgenre. Two games that came to mind as I started looking through this one are Warfighter from DVG Games and then Fields of Fighter from GMT Games. Just a couple of general comparisons, and then I really want to kind of leave that behind because I want this game to kind of stand on its own. Some general comparisons. First of all, I think the complexity in this game and the detail in this game is a level above that of Warfighter. And the other big comparison to make, I think, between those games is that both of those games, Fields of Fire and Warfighter, are designed primarily as solo experiences, or in the case of Warfighter, you can fight cooperatively against the AI, whereas Point Blank has a very robust and fully developed two-player mode. Now, I will also add that when I saw the initial materials about V for Victory, Point Blank V for Victory, I thought, oh, this is a two-player game with a solo mode tacked on. But as I've looked through the materials here now, I would say that that was a mistake on my part. This is, I think, an equally robust solo system as there is a two-player system. So this feels quite intentionally developed to play extremely well at both of those levels. Now, let's take a look at the back of the box to get a couple of general ideas on the overall scope and scale. It says playing time 2 to 4 hours, and that feels about right. There's a lot of scenarios in this box. That's another thing I'll point out. I think we'll see that as we go through. This is a fully fledged system. There is a ton of stuff in here, and yeah, we'll get that. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but there is a ton of opportunities, depth, replayability in this. This feels like they have thrown in everything, including the kitchen sink, to make this a full game experience. 1 to 2 players, again, because there's a fully developed two-player mode, and that's what you learn first, and then the solo mode that's added in at the end and explains how you run the solo mode. So I feel like learning this game, you're going to learn the two-player system first, and then you're going to learn the solo system after that. Complexity is rated as a 6. I'm not quite sure on that. I think that there's probably a little variety in there, and we'll take a look at that as we get in. The rule book is rather long, but I'm about 20 pages into it right now. It's not very complex. So there's a lot, but there's nothing in that substance that strikes me as being overly complex. It seems very straightforward, and I confess, I have had no difficulties so far understanding the intent of the rules and what I'm supposed to do. So for a game in this subgenre, that is a refreshing feeling, and I won't say more on that. I think that the 6 probably feels about right. I might go a little bit higher with the solo system tacked on because you're adding on another layer of complexity to this. Solitaire playability, of course, it gives this maximum of a 10, and that feels right. Again, I haven't played it yet, so I hesitate to say too much about the gameplay, kind of making some assumptions here as we look at it. Now, the other thing I will point out, as we'll see inside, there's over 800 cards in this game. 800. It's amazing, and that's what we're going to spend most of the time looking at. So let's jump in. Again, 1944 is the context here, and it is West Front. I don't think I mentioned that in the intro. You've got Allied forces, US forces, Canadian forces, and British forces making up the 3 Allied components, up in addition to some partisan units too, which is cool. And again, we'll see that as we get in here. It feels like there's been really made an intentional attempt here to really make this system as robust and deep as possible. And of course, the German forces are the exclusive Axis side that you have here. So again, West Front 1944. The core rules, and I'll show this to help you give a little bit of an idea on the complexity, because there are 95 pages. So you might be saying, how can that be a 6 complexity? But if we look at these, there's a ton of graphics, not in the pages I'm flipping over here now, but the print is really big. A lot of them are quick pages. I read through about 20 pages last night in about a half an hour. It's super easy making your way through it. Things feel like they're well explained. There's a lot of examples and things like that. So to this point, now I confess I haven't got into the meat of the rules yet. A lot of it's kind of talking about the cards and what some of the numbers on the cards mean and things like that. I haven't really run into any difficulties, but I would expect that the rules are going to get a little bit more complex as we start to get in things like we can see here, which which is line of sight and elements like that. There's bogging down. There are a lot of mechanics in here. Flanking, fatigue, crew abandoned. The armored vehicles as well as infantry, so there's a full system for that. Just a lot of stuff here. So I think that it's the abundance of rules, perhaps more than their inherent complexity, which gives it a 6, which perhaps is a fair rating. Although, kind of have to dig into a little bit more before we can say that. At this point, this is as an unboxing, kind of making some assumptions at it so far. I should also show too, let me just pull out here at the end, we get to the solo rules, which are, there's not actually that many. It's 87 is where the solo rules start, and they only go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a few pages here, half dozen pages. So when I saw that, I thought, oh, the solo system is tacked on, but it's not. It's clear to me that as I've looked at, and let's take a look at some other the player aids, and I've read through most of that section now too. That's quite a thought out and in-depth section that works with some player aids that I think make things look like they're going to work pretty smoothly. So I don't get a sense in any way, as my initial assumption was, that it's 2-player emphasis with a solo mode tacked on. I feel like there's been a good amount of depth and thought put into developing both of those systems. So at this point, I feel like this is going to be a very strong solo experience, and it's going to be a very strong 2-player experience. They haven't really compromised anything in building the solo mode there. Now, in addition to the 100-page rulebook, you get another 100 pages, well, 85 pages here or so. This is the module rules and the scenarios. There are, to give an idea on how much stuff is in this, and again, this feels more like a system than a game to me. Because there are, we can take a quick look here. These have all the scenarios. There's over 20 scenarios in here, and that's mainly what kind of goes on. There's specific rules for units and specific rules for some of the scenarios and stuff like that. So it has all the setup, and I'll show some close-ups again on this page too as we go through. And then in the end, got a little bit of material on their other games. So Bedlam Bridge, here we have the Order of Battle, train cards, the battlefield setup, Dawn at Saint-Côme-des-Monts. I'm sure I screwed that up. Gosh, sorry. Apologize to our French viewers. Ham and Bloody Jam, so lots of different scenarios. Again, over 20 scenarios in here, but that's not all. This is like a Ginsu knife commercial. As we come to the end, we get here and we see, plus in addition to that, let's get down here, there is a campaign game, which is a linked series of 3 scenarios. There's design your own elements, so each one of the units in the game has a design your own number, which is basically the value of that. So you can say, design your own forces where each side's going to have 100 points and go 2-player that way, where you're kind of playing and you get to pick out your forces and things like that. And the campaign game, I believe, looks like it uses that force order of battle in some sort of a design your own number system where you build your own forces for that campaign game and then play 3 consecutive scenarios out. So there's that as well. Design your own elements, really strong. Just a ton of stuff in here. So there, we have the module rules and scenarios. Next up, we have player aids. There are, I believe there's 9 of them altogether, and there are 5, they divide up into 2 parts. The first 5 here are for the 2-player game, for the game in general, and then the next 4 are interesting flowcharts for the solo mode. And so let's just take kind of a quick look at some of these. I'll show some close-ups on a couple of them to get an idea on some of the things that are in the game, some of the mechanics in the game, but I don't want to spend too much time on these. So first one up here is the the general sequence of play which you're going through. It's a relatively simple sequence of play. Upkeep phase, impulse phase, where you're going back and forth between each one taking action cards that determine what you can do. Then you have a turn end phase, then you check for victory conditions, and you lather, rinse, repeat going through it. Some of the mechanics that we can see here, very well explained, very clear, easy, with a lot of notes on the side. It feels like you're going to be using these player aids a lot, especially as you're using the system. So this is the terrain summary. We have 2 types of terrain, really. Well, terrain and objectives, which are a little bit different in terms of how they function in the game. Here we have stacking limits per sector, and we'll take a look at the map, and I'm using quotation marks, air quotation marks with that, because there really isn't a map, but there is a map, and I'll explain when we get there. Then we have more out of ammo summary, hero summary, Support weapons breakdown, crew abandoned, we've got spotting, line of sight summary. So just a lot of stuff here and a lot of mechanics that are helpful player aids, kind of have the flamethrowers, support weapons. The best part of this, I think, is going to be when we get to the cards in terms of seeing what's in the game, because that's the part that I think has really got me drooling quite a bit as I look at this. Melee, attack modifiers, blaze, retreat. So lots of stuff in here. And then these are the different hero markers and actions that that the units can take and the leaders can take. Again, explaining all the different icons in the game, referring to the different actions that are options and things. So we can see the 5 player aids. There's one set of those, so these would be shared. There's not a duplicate set for each player, one set for the game right there. Then we come to the 4 solo player aids, and you can see immediately that, I'll put again a close-ups here, these are flowcharts. So basically what you're going to do for the solo mode is you're going to roll the 2 dice that are in the game, which aren't necessarily used for dice determination in the 2-player game or during the turns. It's really used for determining what the AI or opponent is going to do, what units, and then you have this flowchart that's used, and there's 3 different types. We can see the colors here, green, red, and a neutral color. The neutral color is used for both offensive and defensive AIs. The red is for the offensive AI, and then the green is for the defensive AI. And what that means basically is that in the scenario as you set it up, your enemy opponent is either going to have a defensive posture, in which case you're going to use the defensive flowcharts, or an offensive posture, in which case you're going to use the offensive posture flowcharts. And then these neutral ones are used in both cases. So you're going to determine an action, then you're going to determine which unit does it, and all the different actions and kind of nuances of that action that happen. I confess, as I look at this, I have no idea how this is going to play out. So that's one of the question marks I have in my head. It looks initially, it strikes me as kind of complex, but as I've kind of worked my way through it, it actually goes very fast a little bit. But this is an unboxing. I haven't spent a ton of time with this yet, so I reserve judgment as to how it's going to play. And obviously, as an unboxing, we're kind of speculating here. I suspect that as you play it more, and it's not as complex as it looks from what time I've been able to spend with it so far. And considering as well that about half of these are going to be used in both sides, and half of them you're not going to use because you're either going to have an offensive or a defensive posture. So there's our player aids rulebook. Still a long way to go. Hang in there. We have 2 maps with air quotation marks in here. These are basically templates that you use to structure the position and the location of the cards. So the cards are going to determine the terrain and everything. Now, I can open these up, but they get pretty big, pretty wide. There's 2 of these and they butt together. And what you end up with is in these rows here, these are areas, and then sectors go horizontally. There are 9 areas vertically, and then there are 5 sectors horizontally. So you're going to end up with a template that has 45 sectors that you play in, each one with its own designation. Your A1, the enemy A1, and then there's a neutral zone in the middle. So each have 4 sides with a neutral zone sitting in the middle. However, the rules mention that you do not need this map template. Once you get used to playing, you can just leave this off. This is more to kind of help structure the game and position of the cards as you're getting used to the system. But the use of this map is totally optional, and you don't need it as you kind of get comfortable with the system. I'll show a distant zoom out on this as well. 38 inches wide by 31.5 inches on the vertical. So, it's a pretty wide template, and I suspect on the vertical you're going to need some space in front for other various kind of cards and elements and things you're using. But that'll give you an idea at least on what kind of a footprint you're looking at to play the game. We do have 2 counter sheets. These are 3/4 inch counters, and let's take these out of the bag and take a look at them. However, it's important to note that these counters are all markers. They aren't units in any way, shape, manner, or form. We've got one that's ready to play leaking out the back there, so let me just get that in. I'll show some close-ups on these. These are things like the unit is moving, and again, you're going to drop these on the cards because the cards are the unit. So we have fatigue, we have covered arc, this is kind of a control icon, different actions that you're going to be dropping on, moving, sectional move, 2-sided for different actions on the back here, fatigue level 2, and then spotted, we got melee overrun, control markers for objectives and things like that. We've got this one's just ready to play, and then AB up here. This is sector, what it's in, sector markers. I'm not quite sure how those work in terms of gameplay, why we have sector counters and things like that. But again, these are all units, counters that you're going to use. You're going to drop onto the gameplay to help structure gameplay, but they aren't the actual units in the game. Now, the fun part. Okay. There are 7 decks here, 7 piles, if you would, some of them combine forces, of cards. We're going to spend a good bit of time going here because I think this is the visual treat that I've spent about an hour at the game so far, and I've probably spent about 40 minutes of that just looking through the cards because it's that, again, there's a lot here, and the ability to, if you like the game system and you dig into it, the ability to design your own scenarios, I think really stands out here. So let's jump in and talk. There are 698 of these 3.5 by 3 inch by 5 inch, I think they are, or poker size, maybe not 3 by 5, regular poker size cards, and then these are half size cards. And let's start with those. So these are leader cards and support weapons and things like that. We're going to take a look kind of these, and I'm going to show a lot of close-ups as these because I think that really helps kind of show the design behind the game and give you an idea on how the game mechanics and gameplay is going to work. So here we have, first up, German leaders. They have kind of morale rating and then an influence on combat. Also down the bottom they have the different actions. So the leaders are somewhat unique. They're all individually named. There are infantry commanders that have no designation, and then we can see Lieutenant Konze here has armor at the top, so he is one of your tank commanders. Down bottom they have specialized actions that they're good at, so the leader's somewhat unique. We get down here to a bunch. Sergeant Dolus, not very effective here. Morale of 5 and influence on combat is 0, but he can spot units and remove 1 fatigue. So a lot of things. There are 10 German leaders here. So and that I think is going to be a repetition of theme here. I'll kind of keep hammering that point that there are a lot of each card, as we'll see, and we start to go through things more. Flamethrowers, radios, satchel charges. So this is kind of gives you an idea, I think, on the things that are going to be involved in the scenarios and what you're playing with. Machine guns, so MG34s, we got MG42s. And again, there's not like 1 or 2 of them. There's 1, 2, 3, well, 3. Okay, there's more of these other counters, but 3 machine gun 42s, 4 machine gun 34s, 1, 2, 3 satchel charges. So there's a lot of stuff. Panzerfaust, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. More anti-tank weapons here. You go through Pupchins, 1, 2 of those. Med kits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. More Pupchins. So there is a lot of everything you get. So that's the German leaders and support weapons. Then we come to the US ones. Again, a collection of 10 leaders of various abilities. Great artwork, each individualized with individual names and things like that. Here we get the flamethrowers, radios, satchel charges, and I'll show close-ups on a lot of these. Bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. Bazookas, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. M1919 machine guns, med kits, lots of those. Rhinos for bogging units, and we get through the American counters there. So again, these will drop down on top of other units kind of in sectors to kind of influence play, and the support weapons, of course, are going to be manned by these other units that are here. Here we have the British. There is a smaller collection. I'm going to kind of make a guess. I'm going to say that it's probably about 40 to 50% of the units and things are US forces, maybe 40% German, and then British and Canadian making up probably the other, and partisans making up the other 20%. That's a rough estimate at kind of the balance of forces that you get here. So it's a US-centric system, but there is quite a bit of British, and we also get Canadians in here too. So we have 2 British leaders, Bren machine guns, Piets, med kits. We go through these. And here we get the Canadians. 1, 2, 3, 2 Canadian leaders, Sergeant Tremblay, Lieutenant Collins, Bren's, of course, again for the Canadians, and Piets we get through here. And then 2, these are partisan leaders, and then we get some blaze markers here. So there is a small partisan contingent in the game as well. Okay, that's 1 stack. So we have a long way to go, and some of these will be a lot faster, but I hope it's giving you an idea kind of what things are in the game here. Let's take a look now at some of the action cards here. So each player, and I might get some of this wrong, so don't hold this to me, okay? Because I think there's a lot more to be said about the game. These are the action cards, and the way it works is that you draw 5 of these at the beginning of a phase, and then you're going to play one of these action cards and go through these until the end of the phase. So these cards, this is an assault counter, dictates what you can do with this. You also use these cards for dice rolls in the general game. The 2 dice that you see here are used in the solo mode to determine the AI actions, where these dice determiners here are pulled out of the deck to determine the dice rolls as you're playing the game. So this is a cover posture here. We get fire, lots of different things, and lots of these cards here, a big deck of these cards. Again, there are, I think, about 100 cards in each one of these decks. So get various actions. Some of them are multiple actions. So this is a ready and then a take over an objective kind of thing, a ready marker. We've got spotting, health looks like, sniper cards. I'm not sure what the lightning bolt one is. I haven't kind of figured that one out yet. But we can see, again, showing some close-ups, a ton of these. These are stacked up. You're going to draw a hand and play out of that hand to determine what actions you can take in the course of a turn. And again, don't 100% take my word. This is kind of a simplified overview from someone who's kind of thumbed through the rules and is about 1/5 of the way through the core rules here. So next up, we have our next deck here, and we're going to start to look at some of the terrain. And again, it's kind of like beating a drum here, kind of saying the same thing. We get some more of the action cards here, but these don't go down that far. So about probably a little bit over 100 or so of that action deck. Now we come to the terrain cards. And the terrain cards here, there's a tremendous variety. We can see the top right here, this fully closed eye means this blocks line of sight. And then there's this bocage. Then we're going to see, and look, again, a bunch of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brush has a partially open eye. This means it degrades the line of sight. If there's no marker on it, as we'll see for some of the other ones here, like clear terrain, then it doesn't impede line of sight at all. Down in the bottom right, there's a defensive value marker. So this bocage has a defensive value as 3, as well as any incidental rules that apply to it here. So I'm going to kind of just go through and I'll show these on the left as we're kind of talking about them. But there are tons of different kinds. We get clear terrain here. Oh my goodness. Lots of clear terrain, of course, as would be expected. And hill, marsh. So units may not refuse. A lot of them have unique characteristics. Minefields, of course, why not? I think just a tremendous variety here as you look through these. Road, stone buildings, kind of going through stone walls, and I'll show close up. Streams, wire, and lots of each one. So again, you can imagine making quite robust scenarios on your own as you're working through these. That is one stack of the terrain cards, but like the Ginsu knife set, there's more. If we look here, we've got wooden buildings. Now this is going to go down. They're going to change about halfway through this pile here. Wooden buildings, woods, the defensive tube fully impedes line of sight. A lot of those there. Woods road. So again, we can see the sheer number here of how many you get for woods roads. Impedes line of sight. Wrecks, when an AFV is knocked out, partially impedes line of sight, adds a defensive value of 1 for some cover. Got a lot of those. Gullies. So just so much creativity, I think, in terms of what I mean, I can imagine you're really going to end up with a lot of variety in terms of, I mean, cemetery. How cool is that? It's just, yeah. I mean, just the variety of scenarios you can think up and work with in addition to the ones that comes with the game here. Hedge. More now, and right here as we shift into this, what we get now, the color of these changes. These are objective cards. So we get crossroads and we can see the flags over here. And this dictates both the ordnance and the control that you need to exert on it. So you're going to need like one value of ordnance and then one I think this is like infantry value here. So this is how many units you have to bring to the crossroads in order to control it. And this would be one of your objectives perhaps in one of the scenarios. Hotel, the bridge, to 3 bridges. So you could have a 3-bridge scenario, churches, manor house, rail station, railroad. It's like, it goes on and on and on. Supply drops here. So for paratroopers and things like that. The orchard, supply dump, of course, how cool. Town square, river, going through them. And I'll show these on the side as we look through these too, but you're getting the idea. Artillery positions, water tower, bunker, 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 truss bridge, farmhouse. Yeah. I will say this as we kind of go through this. One of the things that became apparent to me as I kind of look through this, I mean, this covers, Western Front 1944. I mean, you can, if this is successful and this works, you can easily see where it can go, right? I mean, East Front, you can change the years, Italy, North Africa. The potential for expansion beyond this, I think, is really apparent as I look at it. And again, I haven't played it, right? I haven't played it 2-player and I haven't played it solo. So I need to calm down a little bit because we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But if the system's fun and it's playable and it works out really well, I mean, the obvious opportunities to make this something magnificently grand are apparent, I think, as we look at what's in the box here. But at the same time, they have not put together a really small set to kind of just give you a taste of the game. This is a full system with just lots of stuff in it. Now, perhaps one of the most engaging parts of all of this, we'll take a look at some of the units. So we get the star in the top left, which of course these are US units. Again, just kind of giving you a sample of what's in the game. Trucks, so we get 3, and there's more trucks. There's some more trucks in the other ones. Jeeps, M4A3 E8 tanks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. So again, it's not like 2, there's 5 of these. So you can build a whole set of them coming in here. M8s, cars, M5, so anti-tank guns in here. 57 millimeter anti-tank gun. Mortars, 60 millimeter and 81 millimeter mortars. And again, there's 1, 2, 3 of those here as well. So you can have 3 mortar teams in a scenario. 50 caliber machine guns. Then we get to the infantry units. And this, again, one of the things I want to kind of just point out is there's a lot of them. I think for each of the squad types, there's 10 of each, except for some of the rare German ones, like maybe like the SS units, there's fewer of those. But here we get a second line squad. So these values here, this is the morale, which is a 5. This is the attack power, which is a 1, the bottom right in the red, and the range is the 3. And then these are the actions they can do. So a second line squad, both limited by morale and then also limited by the actions they can take. As we see airborne units, there's going to be a lot more. But again, there's no skimping on these. There are 10 of these. And then you get half squads. And I think what happens is, as they take casualties, they go down to half squads. And I think you can also move them together, put them together, and kind of maybe even split them up yet. I haven't got that far in the rules. But we can see here, second line squad reduced to a half squad, firepower of 0 with a range of 2. And I don't know why you'd do that if it's a firepower 0, but we're getting ahead of ourselves with the rules here. So a lot of second line squads. Airborne squads, so completely different nature, right? They have a shorter range, firepower of 2, morale of 6, but look at the actions they can take, just a lot more actions. And they get plentiful ammo as well. And you'll notice that up here in the top right, these 2 control flags. So this squad could take one of your control positions that has 2 flags to it, one of the objectives. This one has 1, so you need 2 second line squads to hold what 1 airborne squad could do. So again, we have second line squads, 10 airborne squad units here, half airborne squads we go through, infantry squads, so regular infantry squads, better than the second line squads. Again, 10 of those, half infantry squads. So there's just a lot of stuff here. And then we get down to partisan units. Partisan units don't have AFVs, of course, they just have infantry, but there's, I think, 10 of these in here. Slightly less effective in terms of firepower and range, but still, they're in the game, which is pretty cool. So those are 100 of the US units. That's less than half of them. We'll keep going. M36 tanks, and I'll kind of show big kind of blow-ups on these too, but I just want to kind of get, I think it's important to see these because I think if you're making a decision on this game as to whether it be something you want to explore and look at, I think one of the strengths that I've been is again, to me it strikes me more as a system than a game. There's just so much in here. M21 vehicles, M20s. Then we come down, here's the British units. So we get parachute squads for the British. And again, you get 10. Half squads, parachute squads, 10. We go through, I'll show close-ups, infantry squads for the British. Half infantry squads. So a robust system that gives you a lot of these. Cromwell tanks, Fireflies. We keep on going. Tetrarch. Pardon on the pronunciation if I've messed that up. Canadians, here we go, Canadians. Infantry squads. So again, you get 10 infantry squads, half infantry squads. And we come down in here, Otters for the Canadians, and then Vickers machine gun teams that are coming in here as well. A lot of those, and another Otter on the bottom. So again, a limited amount of British. Again, 1944 Western Front and a limited amount of Canadian, but they're in the game. Let's take a look now at our last 2 things, which is the German units. Now, again, this pile here that we're going to look at, it's mostly German, but it has quite a bit of Allied units in as well. Same kinds of themes, though, as we can see with the German units. So we get 10, there's more second-line squads, I think, in this pile. So we get 4 at the top here, and then we get 10 of them here. SS squad, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess there are 10 of them. There's a lot. So SS squads, quite a bit of capability, strong. These compare to the Allied airborne squads in terms of just the amount of capacity, the amount of abilities they have, and again, firepower and range. So we get SS squads here. Luftwaffe squads, much more limited, but perhaps mid-range with limited abilities, but they're there. Half squads of Luftwaffe. We get armored cars, again, We get down here, Jag Panthers. So a lot of German armor. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 Jag Panthers in here. Hetzers. So tank destroyers. M4A1. And the bottom quarter of this are, again, US units. So we get more US, especially AFVs and tanks and stuff. M4A1, get 5 of those, maybe 6. M5A1s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. M10s, M18s, and we go on. So more US. M4-105, so a fairly robust sampling here of Allied AFVs, and M3A2 armored cars, and more trucks down here as well. So some more Allied units. Almost done. One more stack to go through, and this is full German stack here. So we'll put that, I'll get that later, come back in here. Martyrs on the top, kind of looking through Stug 3s, Gs, Panthers. I mean, so just a lot of the classic and iconic German armor in the game as well. Tigers, and we can see the complexity on some of these units. You know, they have a penetration at distance factor down here. Not quite sure how this works, but it has something to do with range and penetration. I just don't quite know what these numbers mean yet. Machine guns are these red numbers. So bow machine gun, I think the general machine gun. So attack, fire, and then range, and then morale, and then I think a high explosive ordnance here, as well as the actions they can take out and some other bits and pieces of information on these. So we get Tiger tanks, German trucks for transporting units, more armored cars here. Let me get through here. 75 millimeter anti-tank guns. 88s are in the game somewhere here. 50 millimeter anti-tank guns. 88s, here we go. Not too many of those, 3 of those. And then Panzer IIIJs, some more armor, Panzer IV-H. So a lot of the classic armor, 7.92 machine guns. So we get more machine gun units, 50 millimeter mortars again. So you get kind of more squadrons here. Fallschirmjäger, pardon on the pronunciation. That's one I really need to learn how to pronounce, my apologies. So 10 of those, then half squads, regular German infantry squads, and we get to the end here, second line squads that were on the top here as well. There you go. We have thumbed through all 817 cards in the game. A lot of cards. They stack up super nice in this too. There's nothing underneath this. This is everything. So we've seen the cards, and again, you know, the cards are going to be your mat, the cards are going to be your units, the cards are going to be, these smaller ones are going to be on top for the leaders and the support weapons. The cards are also going to be your action deck for determining action. So this is a game about cards, and that mat, again, is optional. The counters here are markers that drop on top of the cards, and the cards really are the heart and kind of the soul of this system as we look at it. And again, these mats are optional. Let me know what you think. Quite a bit in here. This is probably a long unboxing, but I felt like there's a lot to show. I want to calm down a little bit, because in an unboxing, I hesitate to say too much about the gameplay, because I don't want to overstate the gameplay until I've really had a sense to kind of go in and play yet. But I will say I'm super excited because this is just a marvelous set of components inside a box. And you know, from what I've seen of the rules so far, it looks really good, it looks really robust. And the thing that surprised me again was when I saw some of the material online about the game before I got a chance to open it up and look at it, I thought it was a 2-player emphasized game with a 1-player solo mode tacked on, but it really doesn't seem that way. It seems like there's been a lot of thought put into that solo mode to make both types of experiences work really well and equally enjoyable. There you have it. Point blank V for victory in the box. Let me know what you think down below. If you've got questions or anything else you'd like to know about that, to the degree that I can, I'd be happy to answer that. Looking forward to digging in this. I'll definitely bring some gameplay to the channel. I'd love to try the solo mode. I hope to try the 2-player mode coming up soon too, but I think what I'll probably do for the channel, just for filming, it's going to be easy to bring the solo mode to the channel. It's going to take a while because we do have, there's 100 pages of rules to work through, and then adding on the solo rules and kind of get a chance to smooth it. So I'll be back at some point in the near future with some gameplay and kind of a formal review of this. But point blank V for victory from Lock and Load Games. Let me know what you think down below. Excited to dig in, and I'll put some links up here to future videos as they are available. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.